Good afternoon, everybody, and my name is Annette Flanagan. I'm the leader of religious education, or the religious education coordinator at MacKillop Catholic College out at Wakeley. And today's masterclass is Buddhism Bioethics. So let us begin. It's just an overview of what I plan to do, but a large focus of what we're going to look at is 4, 5, and 6, particularly the bioethical teachings, how it's applied in the lives of the adherents, and therefore that impact on the adherents. But we're also going to look at past paper questions and some sample responses, all in the hope that you'll be prepared for your HSC exams and trials that are coming up. So let's just look at the syllabus. So for bioethics, you are asked to explain the different aspects of the religious system, describe and analyse the influence of that religious system on the individuals and the society. But in this part, we possibly more focus on the individuals. You're also looking at aspects of religious tradition for the adherents. We are making a judgment, and the questions we'll look at too will make a judgment, evaluate the influence of those traditions on the adherents. We're also looking at the organisation and how you respond. These areas are actually very much aligned with your marking criteria that we use when we are marking either with the trials, with your assessment tasks, or going at the HSC level. So in regard to Buddhism bioethics, we are looking at how the Buddhist tradition is contributing to those, to the ethical issues or ethical way of living. So how Buddhists are living this religious tradition. The focus here is our bioethics. We are going to look at the main features of the teachings and demonstrate that with examples. And we're going to show the relationship between how it should be lived out in the bioethical issue, and make a judgment at different points, depending on the question, to look at how much it's influencing the lives of adherents. I'm hoping by the end of this that you are able to describe and explain Buddhist ethical teachings in regard to bioethics, that you can define bioethics, name the ethical teachings, give evidence from the Tripitaka. There are other sacred texts that you can use, but this has been the main one that I've been drawing a lot of my quotes from. Outline the contemporary issue, evaluate and explain and evaluate the teachings, and be coherently express this in different questions. So let's have a look at Buddhism. It is a lived tradition, and this is the whole point of this study, is to show that the belief systems can be integrated into the lives of adherents, and the point is to reach enlightenment, to actually be on that path to enlightenment and eventually work towards nirvana. Buddhist guides adherents to live skillful, ethical lives to end the cycle of samsara so that they attain enlightenment and pursue nirvana. Bioethical teachings encourage adherents to integrate the teachings of the Dharma into their daily lives in the way they speak, act, in order to be free from defilements. So let's define ethics. Ethics are the explicit religious reflections on moral beliefs and practices to clarify what is right and wrong, what humans should do freely or refrain from. And ethics are characteristics of religion and give expression to the way religion continues to be meaningful in the lives of adherents. And for bioethics, it's generally concerned with the beginning of life, end of life, quality of life, and medical research. And bioethic questions the value of life, which relate to how cultures shape attitudes and value judgment about people. Now, Buddhist bioethics, they recognise that life, knowledge and friendships are the basic goods for all. And Buddhists believe it's always wrong to act directly against life and prohibits the intentional killing of a life. So if we were to actually be defining bioethics at this stage, we have an introductory statement here. So bioethics is that branch of ethics that pertains to the beginning of life, end of life, quality of life and medical research. We have some extra detail here if we want to. Bioethics guides Buddhists to be skillful acts by treating all life as sacred. This shapes the personal moral attitudes, develop good karma, avoid samsara and pursue nirvana. And just a little example, Buddhist Buddhism bioethic teachings guide adherents to value the sanctity of life with respect to issues such as abortion, euthanasia, and organ donation. Now, be aware, there are other bioethical issues that you can be addressing. So some of you might do stem cell research or other bioethical issues, but these are the three that I've actually focused on here in this presentation. So the Buddhist bioethical teachings, they're drawn from the three jewels. So we look at the Buddha and what was the Buddha actually trying to teach the people. But a large source of the bioethical teachings is from the Dharma. And yes, there may be a focus on the 5 precepts as the ethical teachings, but these are all drawn out of the fact that people, Buddhist adherents, are trying to avoid negative karma. They're trying to build up their positive karma in skillful actions. And that draws them to follow that path of the Eightfold Path, and part of that is right conduct, which is where we lead into the 5 precepts. I also draw on the sacred texts, the Pali Canon, or also known as Tripitaka, but the Sangha also plays an important role in guiding the people because they are that source of knowledge, the source of understanding the Dharma so it can be applied into their everyday life. So let's look at what the Buddha is saying in regard to bioethics. So the Buddha is saying that life is sacred. The sentient beings are sacred and all life is good. The lives of all sentient beings are of equal sanctity and equally worth of loving kindness, which is also known as metta and compassion. It's wrong to act directly against life and prohibit the intentional killing of a life. Just be aware here, we are not just talking about humans here, but that term of using sentient beings is very much a Buddhist term that is really encouraged for you to be using throughout your responses. Some of the values of Buddha is metta, of loving kindness, acts of loving kindness, ahimsa, which is non-violence, karuna with compassion, prajna, wisdom, and sila is the right conduct. Now you can use these terms, and when I looked at my responses further on, I don't use all of these terms, but you might actually wish to integrate them into your responses as you go, but these are some of the values that come from the Buddha. The Dharma, so we're going to look at the karma, the Eightfold Path in particular, right conduct, but they're also guided to have right mindfulness so that they can have the right action and right intent in living out the Dharma. And particular focus is going to be the first and second precepts. The first precept of doing no harm, also known as ahimsa, and to do not steal. We're using that in reference to taking the life of another. And I'm going to draw from the Pali Canon when using references or using supporting evidence. Karma is a particular area of the Dharma where it's avoiding, any kind of intentional action, whether mental, verbal, or physical. And the aim for Buddhists is to have that balance between having skillful actions versus unskillful actions. So they need to do what is good and avoid what is evil. And this is their intentional actions. And ethical moral principles are governed by examining whether a certain action is likely to be harmful to oneself or to others, and thereby avoiding any actions which are likely to be harmful or cause mental anguish, such as remorse, anxiety, and guilt. And that's really where the impact on the person is, and whether it's a skillful or an unskillful act is what impact is it having and what on that person or others. The Eightfold Path we may not focus so much on, but there is some you can be drawing from the Eightfold Path to make sure that the person is applying their wisdom through the right understanding, right thought of what it means to actually be living out the Buddhist teachings, right to have the meditation, right effort, mindfulness and concentration in order to have those right thoughts. But very much you are drawing on the conduct, having the right action in that by that person to actually have skillful acts to build up that positive karma. And this is evident also through the precepts. So the point of the Eightfold Path is for them to actually always be doing what is good and positive. Their thinking, their intentions, their energies, having their mindset on what is good and positive, and integrating that into their lives. It's always about ensuring that they are clear in their thinking so that they can make informed decisions. The 5 precepts are a core aspect of bioethical teachings, and we're very much going to be looking at abstain from killing all living things and taking what is not given. You, in a longer response, if you wanted to integrate others, that's your choice, but you have enough with just the first 2 precepts. So the first precept, do no harm, is the point of to undertake the training, and this is actually the way it's been quoted in references I've had from the Tripitaka, to undertake the training to avoid taking the life of beings or sentient beings. Do no harm, but even though there's what things that they need to avoid, there's the first precept actually focuses on respect and dignity for life. It also focuses on practicing what is loving kindness. So this precept applies to all living beings, not just humans, and all beings have a right to their lives, and that right should be respected. So it is about protecting and respecting life. The second precept is to do not steal, is to undertake the training to avoid taking things not given. So avoid taking anything unless it's intended for you, and to practice generosity. And we're going to apply this towards life, because we're going to look at abortion, euthanasia, and not taking what is not given, but we're also going to can apply this to organ donation in being generous. You can relate to the 5th precept, but I'm going to leave this one at the moment. If you wish to explore it further, it can be related, particularly with euthanasia, and making sure that somebody does not inhibit their thinking when they are actually making these decisions in their life. So these are some of the sacred texts that relate from the Tripitaka or from the Pali Canon. And for me, I actually use a website called Access to Insight that gives you access to the Theravada version of the Tripitaka. It's very easy to use. It has a nice search engine. So if you had something you were looking up, you can put into the search engine. Not only will it try and give you verses from the Tripitaka, but it also give you other useful articles that you can use. But these are some that I've taken. You won't use all of them, but it is worth being able to maybe have your study notes based around sacred text, and then having an understanding of how you're going to apply them in your passages. So some of them, undertake the training rule to refrain from taking life. So there's actually one you can use in relation to the first precept. Show kindness to humans and to protect them. And with the KHP is actually the book it's from in the Tripitaka, and the 2 is like the chapter. If you do get lost, you can put Tripitaka underneath. We do know that you forget things and just say that it's come from that text as well. May all beings to be happy at heart, or restraint everything, have restraint everywhere is good. Train in acts of merit. So you have a lot of different ones there. What's also great about Buddhism is you can actually be, if you're talking even about right action, you actually can be quoting that as evidence to support. So it's not just words that you're using from Buddhism, but it's actual quote from the sacred text. So you can be using those in your responses. Now, the Sangha plays a role, and their emphasis is giving authority to practical guidance about ethical behaviour, and an ordained monk should not intentionally deprive a living thing of life, even if it is only an act. Well, we should change that. And that's from the sacred text of Vinyaha. The monks were actually part of the guidance for medical intervention early in their establishment, and they can still be guidance for the people. We are going to look at the impact on adherence, their everyday decision-making, how to treat life as sacred, personal moral attitudes, clear moral foundations which benefits interactions with others, how to develop good karma in order to avoid samsara and pursue nirvana, and how it informs the bioethical issues of abortion, euthanasia, and organ donation. So these are the key bioethical teachings I look at: that life is sacred, to do what is good is skillful, which relates to karma, right action, avoid taking the life of beings, and to practice loving kindness. So when you get into your short answers for Buddhism, you're going to, the structure has changed a little bit last year, but this was a typical type question that could be asked, where it's a short one, and we're just going to look at this before we even get into an issue, because this question here is to describe one ethical teaching in Buddhism. Now, that might be actually hard because all the ethical teachings can sometimes merge into, but you're going to look at least one ethical teaching, and you can always further elaborate on that. So I've got a response for you here. Remember, you're looking here at bioethics. So the focus here is on the bioethical teaching. It's not an issue. So really, in this response, if I am going to be mentioning a bioethical issue, it's a mention. It's not actually the focus of this question. So I'm looking here for 3 marks to be able to give some information about ethical teachings from Buddhism that guides that bioethical understanding for the adherents. So here's a sample response. Defining what is bioethics. Okay, beginning and end of life. Bioethic teachings, the guide Buddhists, and very much as skillful acts, but here is the teaching. Life is sacred. So person is shaping person's moral attitudes to develop good karma. So even in this response, even though we've been asked for one ethical teaching, because they sort of merge and they link together, you can actually mention more than one. You don't want to go too fast. Maybe my response might be a little bit long, but you can be addressing one, but further depths to stretch it. And the point of karma is to avoid samsara and nirvana. It's really important you get those words in, because this is the whole point of actually Buddhism. Drawing from the first precept, Buddhists are to abstain from harming all sentient beings and value all life. Now that links to what was in one of the previous sentences, that life is sacred. So this is where you could be saying it is related to the same ethical teaching. A person is not intervene to shorten a person's life. So Buddhists are to do what is good by avoiding any action which are likely to be harmful or cause mental anguish. And now you can see here in my last sentence, Buddhism applies these ethical teachings to bioethical issues of abortion, euthanasia, and organ donation, where they are guided to value the sanctity of life. So that has been the focus of my ethical teachings, sanctity of life, but it is further supported through the first precept and doing skillful acts to build up good karma. This here may be also used if you're writing an essay, or you need a starting point for like an 8 marker as well. So the focus here was on the bioethical teaching, setting that foundations, and in later questions we'll start to apply these ethical teachings to the issues. All right, so let's start to look at one of the issues. My plan is, depending on time, to go through abortion with some depth and look at a response, and then show you how you can plan for a response with this information. All right, so abortion. So we're going to define what abortion is here. It's a deliberate termination of a pregnancy, and Buddhism believes life begins at conception. And that's really an important point when you're looking at abortion, is when does life begin? So for Buddhists, and it is about it beginning here as at conception. So early Buddhism sees the start of human life as that moment of conception, and they're being ready for rebirth is known as Gadhaba, and is seen as the egg is fertilized by the sperm. And this is when rebirth takes place, where there is the union of the mother and the father. And this is actually part of, I've taken this from a discourse, so from the Tripitaka as well. Moving on. So let's apply it to the sanctity of life. So that teaching that we had in our previous response. So after conception, abortion is not acceptable in Buddhism because it means taking away of life that is already present in the form of a fetus. And abortion is inconsistent with Buddhist principles, and it goes against the sanctity of life. Can you see here that we might be making a statement about what Buddhists believe, but we're also linking it to the ethical teachings? So with the sanctity of life being valued, it is prohibited to kill anything that is living. There's need to be aware that in Buddhism, there's no distinction as to whether a person is born or whether they are in the process of being born, seen or unseen, or just an atom. They are actually considered to be a living thing, and they are to be a sentient being. So they are to be protected. Let's relate this to right action in the precepts. So the first precept advocates for protection of all life, and one must abstain from killing or harming living things. Buddhists believe that to terminate a pregnancy at any time would be considered to be breaking the first precept. So abortion is considered an act of violence and a form of murder because the fetus possesses an individual distinct form, a distinct individuality distinct from the mother. And the taking of another's life through abortion is considered stealing a life, which is not freely given, and that's against the second precept. So every point here where we've said that Buddhism does not support abortion, we're actually linking it to the precepts and to that right action that Buddhists need to undertake. Here's some supporting passages. And why do we keep including supporting passages? Because that's what's going to get you those higher marks. If you're just talking about the ethical teachings without having supporting evidence, then you're actually not going to get those higher marks. And here's some that I've found that have related, and the first two are from the Tripitaka again. Right action, abstain from taking life. So there's words that you would use possibly in your response. They're actually a quote from the Tripitaka. Wrong action as killing living beings, taking what is not given. Here down we've got another quote from, this is a writer that I use that has come from that source, Access to Insight. So intentionally bringing about the death of a human being, even if it is still a fetus, whether by killing the person, arranging for an assassin to kill the person, inciting the person to die, or describing the advantages of death, is a grave offence. And I like that language. So you could say intentionally bringing about the death of a human being, even if it's a fetus, is a grave offence. And abortion from a Buddhist view is an act of killing and is negative. So there's the Dalai Lama. And if you are actually studying Dalai Lama, there's a quote you could maybe use for both. Karma. So application of karma to abortion. So the Buddhist perspective, abortion is tied to that notion of karma and the taking of life, which results in negative karma and leads to further suffering for not only for the mother, but also for the child. It is considered an unskillful action of taking life of the fetus, and it causes the mother to accumulate bad karma. The main goal of Buddhists is to become liberated from the cycle of samsara, and the process of becoming born, dying, and born again. Abortion can interrupt that cycle because as they accumulate more bad karma or negative karma, it actually is going to impact their rebirth into the next life. Again, some supporting evidence around karma. So the well-being of the fetus is actually to be, is a skillful act. So they actually have to care for the fetus. And a prominent bioethical writer or authority for Buddhism is D. Kiwon, and he writes, the correct analysis of pregnancy from a Buddhist perspective is not that the fetus is part of the mother, but that one individual is temporarily housed within the body of a mother. An abortion is therefore neither simply the loss of part of the mother or a temporary direction of life flow. In the simplest terms, it is the intentional destruction of a karmic being. So there's some nice language there that you might want to use in your responses. Again, some more supporting evidence for you. Even the monks, they're not allowed to deprive a human being of life. They should not deprive him. And Buddhism is not opposed to population control except by means of abortion. So they do not advocate for abortion. They objections apply to the demands for virtually indiscriminate abortions. So here, and intentionally bringing about the ultimate death of a human being, even if it's still a fetus, is an offence. Now, as we get on to exemptions, one of the areas of concerns when we are looking at responses from students is that their responses focus more on the exemptions when abortion is allowed. And to be perfectly honest, for Buddhists, it's not condoned, it's not supported. So in a large percentage of the time, Buddhists do not support abortion at all. And often in the responses we see, even at the marking centre, we see people talk about when Buddhist abortion is allowed. So be very careful in making sure your responses talk about the bioethical teachings and about why Buddhists do not support abortion. But as your attorney, you can, when in your maybe a 6 or 8 marker, you are able to then, where you need to show some more depth and you want to actually look at some of the variants, you can actually make mention of exemptions. But this is not the main focus of any response. So some exemptions. So Buddhism does acknowledge the act of abortion when the mother's life is in danger. So these are very limited times. Abortion may be allowed if the woman's pregnant because of rape, if the baby has a medical problem, or if there is a moral justification for the abortion. Now, in Thailand, if you're looking at variants, one way with Buddhism, you can mention Theravada, Mahayana, or you can also look at the way that Buddhism is practiced in different countries. So with the Thai law, they do not allow free abortion. So abortion, that means abortion if you just don't want the baby, that's not allowed. But they may allow abortions when the mother has been raped and keeping the baby may be fatally harm the mother. And in Thai, as a result of this, so that where they do allow abortions, it's encouraged in Thailand that they engage in ceremonies where women are able to restore and lessen the harm of doing the abortions. So these Thailand ceremonies are resorted to by women to lessen that harm due to the aborted fetus. This would be achieved by transferring the merit of the ritual to the fetus. So they know that the act of abortion is not something that they really want to be part of, but in certain circumstances, when it does take place, they actually look to gain merit through engaging in these ceremonies. All right, so let's have a look at a response. So we're building up towards response. So we have our issue, our bioethics, our ethical teachings. So we're going to look at sanctity of life, right action, precepts and karma, and the lived experience in relation to abortion. And abortion from a Buddhist view is an act of killing, and Buddhist adherents are to avoid engaging in abortion. So here's his first main question. So it's from 2020. And see the question 12 in the 1 unit or 23 in the 2 unit. It's a short answer question. This question has a stimulus and it has the question to focus on, and you need to pick one of these areas, and we're doing bioethics. So let's have a look at the question first. So we've got to what extent does the above advice give guidance to the adherents? So let's unpack this question. I use this is called an unpacking the question table, which I've been provided by people who've assisted me in my understanding and teaching of SOR in the past. And you can use this for any of your questions in SOR or even in any other subject. So let's use this for that question I've shown you. So the question here is, to what extent does the above guidance, and give guidance to the adherents? So we need to actually know what outcome we're looking at, because the outcome guides us. And one of the problems we can have when we have sometimes a general question, or if we don't read all the aspects, we go and talk about anything that we think relates to Buddhism. So, but this question is related to bioethical teachings, in particular to bioethics. What is the content that we're going to look at? We're looking at bioethical teachings, how it relates to being integrated into the lives of adherents. We're 2 content areas. Every question has generally 2 content areas. And our first one is going to be bioethics is with relation to one ethical issue and the impact on the adherents. So our other content areas, adherents. Now you might think it doesn't say anything about nirvana, enlightenment or suffering, but what is the impact on adherents? It's actually impacting their ability to actually achieve this. In structural verb, here we've got to what extent. Well, that's a judgment, and that draws from analysis, evaluate, and examine, and we'll look at those as well. And our glue word, it's a glue word, and you're going to find this glue word is in just about all of these questions that I've got here in relation to Buddhism. It's about guidance. So how does it assist them, lead them, teach them, or inform them? And the question also has a quote. So the quote is, generosity and kind words, conduct for others' welfare, impartially in all things. These are suitable everywhere. You'd never use this whole stimulus as one. So what I've done here is broken it up into what could be usable chunks, or you use the words. Down in the bottom here, I've got academic words. These are related to the instructional verbs. So you want to try and use, and you might have other academic words that relate to what extent, but here's some examples. And here's some of the language you need to be using that I was using in relation to the bioethical teachings for abortion. So let's have a look at response and how we've used this. So this is a response for you. It's an 8 marker. And so therefore we'll have a thesis statement where you're actually trying to include language. This is what I've underlined here. Language, it's about to what extent, but also the aspects of the stimulus as well in that. So I've highlighted those things there for you. Trying to also utilize language that relates to Buddhism as well. In the second part here is where we're actually going to start to look at the bioethical issues and relate it to the and make that link with the bioethical teachings. So I'm not going to read all of this for you, but I've highlighted here also where I've used a supporting evidence and also the language of to what extent, and people say, oh, how often should we be using this? Well, the more you can include it, the better. 3 is not enough. I'll be looking at if you're looking at your academic language of to what extent, you'd be looking at possibly an 8 marker, you're possibly looking about 8 times, you know, in your introduction, in your body, and in your conclusion. You're also looking for a number of supporting passages all the way through, and also looking to be able to integrate all the different aspects of the stimulus as well. And here I've only used sometimes a single word. So I'll let you read through that. What the purpose here is, I should be using some of the information I have from above. Then we've moved on, and I've included the second precept here, and also some more supporting evidence, and also linking in the stimulus as well. I'd possibly leaving it at the end where I actually now am talking about the variants, and this is so making sure that in the first in this response, I've set it up that I'm talking about the precepts and when Buddhism is actually not allowed before I bring in when it is allowable and when it's considered a skillful action. And then down the end, a conclusion, it's saying that they are to avoid abortion, because that is what is, for the majority of the time, Buddhists are to avoid abortion. Using language indicating to what extent, bringing in some of the teachings, and also trying to integrate the stimulus as well. Now, you might be able to write it differently, but here's a sample that you can use and to try and apply it in different situations. Actually, you could actually take it to a different question, and you can actually adjust it to different questions in order to try and see if you can make it work, and also to see your flexibility in being able to apply your knowledge. Euthanasia is another area that you can be doing, and I know my time is coming towards an end. So let's have a look at this euthanasia. Euthanasia is that painful killing of a patient from an incurable disease. Euthanasia is a deliberate intentional act to end the life, and that's important to know. It's a deliberate intentional act to end the life of another person in order to relieve that person's suffering. We have voluntary and involuntary euthanasia, and voluntary euthanasia is also known as voluntary assisted dying. Again, there is a focus on protecting the life and the sanctity of the life, and in the lives of sentient beings of equal sanctity and equal worthy of loving kindness and compassion. So the human life is seen as to be precious, and it is to be protected all the way through their life. So Buddhist bioethical teachers indicate that it is inappropriate to end the life through the act of euthanasia. The Eightfold Path guides a person to conduct themselves in a proper way, to have the right mindfulness, even during times of suffering, to lead them to have the right action and conduct. Euthanasia will mean that if a person takes part, that the body is reincarnated back into samsara. So they're not actually going to be breaking the cycle and will be reborn again. The right action and the precepts apply here. So the first precept, to abstain from killing and to protect that life, applies definitely with euthanasia. And Buddhists believe that to terminate a life at any time would be considered to be breaking that first precept. And the first precept encourages Buddhist adherents, to abstain from the acts of harming and killing living things. So with the precept, there's a strong belief that life should not be destroyed, and steers adherents away from participating in deliberate causing the death of a living being. So it's considered to be an unskillful action to be engaging with euthanasia. The second precept is also worth mentioning here because it's not a life that's freely given. So in taking somebody else's life, it goes against the second precept, and involuntary euthanasia could be considered stealing that person's life. So the intentional killing of life strongly violates the Buddhist value for life. Karma also applies here, and euthanasia is regarded as an unskillful act leading to negative karma. And the Dalai Lama says it's better to avoid than to be actually taking part in it. So some supporting passages for euthanasia, and these might be similar to what you can use some of the ones from abortion as well, but there are other additional ones here that you can be utilising, and that the taking of life actually leads to hell. There's a couple there that state that at the bottom. Those who take life are destined for a state of deprivation and are destined for hell. If you are doing King Ashoka and you can draw on some of his edicts, but it's best to actually stick to the Tripitaka for your evidence. Okay, I've got a question. What do you mean by unskillful? Unskillful means that it's not in line with, it's not a good action. It's not in line with the Buddhist teachings. So it's a term that possibly when I started teaching Buddhism, I didn't actually use a lot, and it's something I've used more lately, but it's saying that whatever action they've taken is not in line with what the Buddhist teachings would be. And then if it's not in line, then it's an unskillful act, because a Buddhist is expected to be skillful, so therefore mindful of what they're doing and actually train themselves to actually be on that path towards nirvana. So that's what it means to be unskillful, particularly if they're uninformed. There are some alternatives to euthanasia, and this is an aspect that you can address. So really, Buddhists do encourage hospice care or palliative care, and there's some actions there for you that you can actually address. And there are Australian ones as well, and I use that in the response I'm about to actually give. There are exceptions at times, but again, as I said, for abortion, you need to focus on when it's not allowed, and possibly even focusing on their alternatives to euthanasia rather than looking at the exceptions. But it is mainly for Buddhists to not actually be engaging in euthanasia at all. Let's see. So let's have a look at another question and relate this one to euthanasia. This one would be from 2018, had the old two-part questions. And you can see the first part is outline one ethical issue that we did earlier. But now we're going to look at part two. How does the teaching outline in part one guide adherents in their daily living? So let's unpack that question. I've used the same table again, but actually I've copied a lot of it across because a lot of it still relates. The outcome hasn't changed. The syllabus hasn't changed. The content, we're actually here looking at ethical issues and then relating it to euthanasia. But keyword thing I want you to realize is the glue word hasn't changed. It's all about this guidance. So it's really important that you have a great understanding of how the ethical teachings guide adherence in relation to the bioethical issues. There's no stimulus this time, but the question is asking in relation to daily living. This time the question, the instructional verb is how, which is an explain. So they don't always tell you explain. So you need to know that how means to explain. And here's some of the language you can use. I have also kept in some of the language from to what extent. You could draw on that if you wish to. The technical words haven't changed either, because these are the words you need to be using in your responses. So let's have a look at this response. I've done this one a little bit differently, where I've actually highlighted the thesis and I've gone through and highlighted daily living. And this is possibly what you could do. You could take older responses and apply them to a new situation and see where you can actually integrate the question and make sure you actually have not copied, but addressed what the question is asking. Because when I first did this, I didn't have daily living in there and I had to go and work at the question to the response to ensure that I was answering the question. You'll also see that there are supporting evidence in there, and it's also addressing the different ethical teachings. I've included the alternatives, so palliative care in this response, and always trying to link it back to the question of daily living. I possibly could be look for a second way of a third way of integrating daily living in my evidence and effect part of my response. And then you've got your conclusion there that also reiterates the main teachings that you had. So these are responses you can use. You could take this response and you can apply it to the question we did earlier on abortion, and I gave you on abortion, and you can elaborate even further to make it into an 8 marker and integrate the stimulus even further. What you might also notice is that when I do these responses, I only focus on one issue. And what we find sometimes is if you actually try to integrate 2 issues, like here, if you try to integrate abortion and euthanasia into this question, what you do is you lack depth. So in these responses, with your short answers, it's possibly better to have a greater depth of understanding with regard to one issue. So for example, here, euthanasia, and apply and link it to a number of teachings, ethical teachings. So you're integrating the first precept and karma and sanctity of life as well. And then have the time to be able to go on to alternate ways of instead of euthanasia, and then I haven't integrated the variants in here, and that could be another way that you can extend this question. So there's plenty in here without having to actually do another issue. So be aware of that when you do your short answers. I know our time is, we've got a few more minutes. Organ donation is another area that we do. And the main reason I do organ donation is because we're getting ready for essays. With an essay, you need to have at least 2, maybe 3 areas. With short answers, you can possibly get away with having one bioethical issue in depth. But for an essay, you need to be ready with, this is an area you're doing for your essays, you need to be ready with at least 2 bioethical issues in depth and maybe a third. So organ donation, the reason why we do organ donation is because it actually is a positive, and it's a good alternative to euthanasia and abortion. So organ donation is removing of an organ from a body to be given to another person. And Buddhists see nothing intrinsically wrong with this organ donation. So they believe that it actually supports the lives of sentient beings, and it's an equal sanctity and equally worth of loving kindness and compassion. And organ donation is one way a person can show that kindness and compassion to another person. So it's actually a positive karma thing as well. In organ donation, you can actually relate it to the First Noble Truth in realizing that all life has suffering. And so therefore, because all life has suffering and there's impermanence in life, a person can actually let go of their physical body here on earth and to be able to offer it to somebody else to help them to alleviate their suffering. So there is a link there to the First Noble Truth. Allow you to, when you get the PowerPoint, you can delve deeper into this as well, but it's about letting go and not having attachment to this physical body, which is impermanent, and being able to donate their own organs to a person is seen to be a positive act. So the Eightfold Path, the act of organ donation, is a charitable action and thus a correct and favourable action. It's in line with actually the first precept, and it's about advocating for the protection of life. And when the body part is freely given, it's considered to be an act of generosity and an opportunity to actually do something positive for somebody else. And for karma, it's actually a positive way of building up karma. So this is why I encourage it in our essay writing, because there's an alternate way of not in opposition to always saying that with abortion, euthanasia, not to do, but this is an act that is considered to be one that generates good karma. So some supporting passages there that you can use. It's an extremely positive action, and non-attachment to the body can be seen in the context of non-attachment to self, and it's about helping others. Now, in the Theravada, this is what the other reason we do organ donation is there is two distinct responses from the variants. The Theravadins consider it to be quite acceptable and a generous act, and it's the highest form of showing compassion. And particularly in Malaysia, it is really considered a positive act. And the Theravada Buddhism permit organ donation is they believe that the body is no longer part of the sentient being, so the body can actually be, the organs can be extracted from the body and those donations can be made. But on the contrast is Mahayana tradition. They actually, even though they do support the idea of donation, they don't allow the body to be touched straight away, and actually the body can't be touched for 8 hours, which means that the organs are no longer viable for extraction, and the person cannot donate their organs. However, they will accept organ donation if they were a person that was in need. So why organ donation as an option here for Buddhism is you can get the variants, and you have the two different variants schools of thoughts, one saying both of them actually support organ donation, but Theravadins saying yes, it can be done because they believe the body is no longer linked to the sentient being. But for Mahayana, there has to be a time of 8 hours before the body can be touched. So it shows contrast. I've provided again another question for you. And this one is a different one. So to show you how you can actually be addressing these questions. And this one's about renew humanity, and it has a quote. Again, I've actually done the question unpacking, and I haven't changed much except for the quote is in this time and maybe looking at different content. It's about renew humanity. So what I want you really to know is that in Buddhism, with your bioethics, it's about how it's guiding adherence all the way, but the question just changes slightly. So here's my response in utilising organ donation, and I've tried to highlight here where I've actually tried to address the question where it's renew humanity, and then in the bold where I've also got the stimulus being utilised as well. But you'll see that I took generally about bioethics, then I bring it into organ donation. I have quotes that support all the way through, as well as the teachings. There's karma. I have the variants in here. This is one of the reasons why we use organ donation, because it does allow us to bring the variants in a little bit easier. We use the Vinyaha Pitaka about the monks and have the different sources in there. And you can use this response. You could take this response on organ donation and apply it to the other two questions that I've given you and adjusting it as you go along. And that's a good practice to do, because you're not always having to write, but you can use a response that you have to actually see if it's flexible enough to be able to use with all your other questions that you come across. I'm going to pause for a moment before I go on to the essays. I want to ask you, if anyone has any other questions? I know we've been asked about the unskillful act. So we'll move on. I have focused on short answers at the moment, but each one of these short answers that we've done today could be, the three of them could be reworked to actually go into an essay. Most of the Buddhism essays that we have at the moment require a more holistic type essays, but you could actually practice in seeing if you can write 2 or 3 in-depth paragraphs that relate to a holistic essay to practice your flexibility and ability to adjust questions. So that's, even once you've got a decent response for each of your bioethical issues, you can then be trying to apply that to different questions. And that's one form of study. You don't always have to be rewriting and writing things from scratch. You can actually be taking what you have and then trying to apply it into different situations. So here, for example, is a holistic essay. So I noticed last year's in the holistic essay, they gave you extra information to say that you need to address 2 of the 3 areas that you studied, and one of those areas is bioethics. So anyone last year or in this response here could have taken any of the paragraphs that we've looked at before in the short answers and applied it, and it could have been one of their paragraphs in this holistic essay. Just be aware, when you do holistic essays, there is an expectation, even though it may not say it. I know last year's did, but 2021 didn't. There is an expectation that you are doing the syllabus dot points. You're not talking about Buddhism in general. You're actually needing to address bioethics, a person or your school of thought, or a practice like Wasak. So this essay question here, and if you had studied bioethics, you could actually be applying any of those. You could be applying any of those responses I did from above and reworking it so that it actually could be applied to this question. So that's actually possibly a task you could do if you are looking at doing Buddhism essays. So here's an unpacking of that question again. And can you see, it's again about guiding adherence, but it's just now they've changed. It's not about, they're just changing the ending part. It's now on life's journey. Well, what is life's journey for adherence? It's nirvana, enlightenment, and suffering. So can you see there's a lot of consistency in what you're actually applying your responses to? They change it up by having a different stimulus, okay? But you're looking here about life's journey, the virtuous deeds, wisdom, and right mindfulness. So you could actually take any of the responses from before, see if you can actually, any of the paragraphs before, see if you can actually rework it to apply it to this question. And when you are planning your responses, here's just 3 different areas. It's like a summary of the 3 different areas that I've done. And when you're planning a response, if you were doing a holistic, if you're doing an essay that was all bioethics, you would actually want to include at least 2 paragraphs. And my recommendation is each paragraph only deals with one issue at a time. And here is possible 3 paragraphs you could do if you were doing an essay question that was fully on bioethics. And even though in the past there've been holistic type essays and you might only put in 1 paragraph, be aware they could ask, and we don't know when, they could ask any time where you need to do a holistic essay, a whole essay on bioethics. I hope today has been useful for you and that you find the resources helpful in your planning going forward. Please take those responses that have been given to you. They are a gift for you, and please start to apply them to different short answer questions from past HSCs, or even any holistic essay or any type of essay that you can use bioethics in, and try to manipulate those responses in order to integrate other points that you might have, other stimuluses that you've used in your other responses or any other supporting evidence, to be able to show that you can manipulate and you can adjust responses to answer questions that come up, because that will actually help you to prepare for the trials. You don't know what it's going to be, and to prepare for the HSC. So thank you very much, everybody. And I hope this has been useful.